In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at color modes. Color modes are important for us to know as designers because we have two that we're going to use all the time. Those color modes that are used for screen, which are websites and mobile devices and iPads and computers and everything else, even TVs, and then what we have for print. And they're diametrically opposed to each other. One is called the additive color mode. That's the RGB color mode, where you add red, green, and blue together, and the more that you add, the closer they get to white. The other one is subtractive, or cmyk, and that's where when you blend the different colors together, they get darker. And you'll notice that if you put yellow, magenta, and cyan together, it equals black. But you notice that it says cmyk, and the reason why is because you have to have black as its own color, because it's difficult to make to mix 100% of all the colors together and then add a little bit more blue. So what they do is they separate the black as its own color, so you can add blue plus a little bit of black to make that blue darker. So just something to know. Now be aware that when you actually look at the black that's created in the center of CMYK, it's actually not pure black, and that's why they add that key color as well. Now, this is something else that's really important about what's happening in the print industry, and that is you'll notice a lot of printers come with more than just cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. This one has a magenta, but it also has a light magenta and a light cyan, and that means that this is called a wide gamut printer. It means that it uses more colors than CMYK. So what it means for you as a designer is that you always want to use the RGB color mode, and you'll see why here in a little bit. Now this is what's called color gamut, and gamut is the amount of colors that you can see or use in any one color model. And they're different color, color gamuts are CMYK, sRGB, Adobe RGB, Pro RGB, which you'll hear about more in the tutorials as well. And you'll see in here the CMYK color spectrum or color gamut is only a small subset of all those colors, and then you get outside of it, you've got RGB and you've got more, and then you've got the whole visible spectrum. And so even RGB color can't show you all the colors that we can actually see, and that's why you have these other color modes that add more color capability in Photoshop. Now, one of the things that we're definitely going to want to play with are the color pickers for different color modes in Photoshop. So we have HSB, which is hue, saturation, brightness. Then we have RGB, lab, which is a little bit different, and then CMYK. Most of the time, you guys are going to be using the HSB color mode to be able to choose colors, because it makes it really easy. When you're in HSB, this is the default right here. You've got all of your hues here from red all the way to the red on the other side and everything in between, and then you have brightness from the bottom to the top, so it's lighter to darker, and then you have saturation from the left to the right. So this means no red all the way to 100% red. So that means full black is over here, but on this right hand corner you have black with red mixed in, although you might not actually see that red. Alright, so moving on, we're also going to play with color modes in Photoshop, and that is where you have the ability to go between RGB, CMYK, lab, which we'll hardly ever use, and maybe even grayscale. And these are really important at different times. So what makes these colors kind of possible are what's called bit depth. And bit depth is if you have a 0 or a 1, that's 1 bit, that means you only have 2 colors. It's either black or white. As soon as you start to add more bits of color, and as soon as you get to 8 of them, you have what's called a byte, and that means you have 256 colors. But if you have 16 bits, you have 65,000, 24 bits, you have 16.7 million, and then 32 bits, you have 16.7 million plus alpha channels. So you can see that there's a big difference between an 8-bit file and a 24-bit file when it comes to the number of colors that can be used. And this is something that we will address later on as well. Now that 1-bit image is this. This is a bitmap color mode. And a bitmap image and a bitmap color mode, sound the same, but they are different. What this means is that it is only black or white. You can also see that in grayscale, but grayscale has more than just black and white. It has grays as well. So this is 1 bit, but this is 8 bytes typically. Then when you start to add in some other color, you might just add a single color, and that could be what's called a duotone, which is a very fun specialized type of image to create. And then you have RGB, which is the full spectrum of colors that we're used to. And you have, this is something kind of special that's happening a lot nowadays as well, and that is even within RGB you have some different use of color. For example, what the regular photo might look like versus what the high definition range photo, high dynamic range, photo might look like. And so this is just where they've taken multiple images and put them together to bring out different aspects of that image. So HDR really is just RGB color space, but it means that the dynamic range of that image is a little bit greater. So what we're going to do in this exercise is go back to Photoshop or go back to an image search and find an image that you think is kind of colorful. So I'm going to go with like a sunset, something like that. I want something really colorful. So there's a colorful image. It's got a number of different colors in it. What might be really fun too is colored balloons. Color balloons would be great. So let's go to images. I want lots of different colors. So that's not great. I'll use that. It doesn't matter if it has stuff on it or not, because there we go. It's a little bit low resolution. You can see it's trying to think of that image, but it looks like it worked. Yeah, I still like that one because it's super bright. Okay, so I'm going to copy this image. And I'm going to go back over to Photoshop. I'm going to do File, New, and it has the clipboard. And I'll create and I'll paste that image with Control V, Edit, Paste. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten that image for right now, just so it doesn't have multiple layers. Now with this image, you'll notice that if I go up to Mode, I've got a number of different modes here. And so one mode that I want to go to is cmyk. But before I do that, I want you to know that when you switch color modes, it's going to be destructive to that image. So you typically want to go ahead and save an image. So I'm going to save this as ExPSColorModes. And this really should be PSColorModes. And that really should be ExPS image resolution. So it's always Photoshop first. So I've got this image here, and once again I'm back in the mode of RGB. If I switch to cmyk, it'll come up with a warning, says, hey, you're about to do this. Are you sure you want to do that? I say okay. And notice if your colors change. Now if you press Control Z and keep on, let's see, let me redo, it's Shift Control Z, Control Z and Shift Control Z. You'll notice that it toggles back and forth between the different looks. And what's happening here is that when you convert it to cmyk color mode, it's going to reduce some of the color fidelity of that image. And that's really not a good thing. So I'm going to undo, so I'm back to RGB, and you'll see it says RGB at the top. Now I'm going to go to mode where it says grayscale and see what happens there. Boom. If I go to grayscale, you'll notice that my entire image turns into a grayscale image. Now that means I'm getting rid of all the color. And so here's something I want you to be aware of. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to go over to where it has adjustments on the right hand side, and I'm looking for one called black and white. Black and white allows me to create an adjustment layer that tells me how I'm going to treat the different colors within this image. So I'm going to go ahead and close that so I can bring my properties a little bit larger. So you can see that I can control how it treats each individual color channel. And that's because when I'm using RGB, and then each color is kind of separated mathematically into reds and yellows and greens and cyans and blues and magentas, and I can fiddle with each, which is really kind of cool. And I can fiddle with these before I want to take this thing and turn it into a grayscale image. So what you want to do is change it into something that you like, and then go to Image, Mode, Grayscale, and you'll see when I flatten this and I discard any of the color information, it will stay just like that altered version that I had of the original. So there's one last color mode here that I want you to be aware of, because since we've converted this thing into grayscale, we now have the ability to go into a bitmap. And a bitmap is really kind of fun. If you go to bitmap, we have a number of different ones. So a 50% threshold is pretty common, but I'm going to take this thing up to actually a very high resolution, so about 600 pixels per inch. Not super high, but actually large enough. It's one of the things when you convert something to a bitmap you really want to be aware of. And look what happens to my image now. Now all it did is it took anything that was 50% black and it made it, or 50% dark and it made it black, and anything 50% white was turned into 100% white. Now if I undo that, I could have gone to Mode, Bitmap, and used something like a pattern dither, and you'll see it gives me a very different look. Kind of fun, right? So these are very old school types of images when we deal with bitmap graphics themselves. But I'm going to do once again the bitmap, change it to my 50% threshold, and click OK. And that's going to be the end of this color mode, and you're going to save this file here. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and you'll notice that I can save this thing as the ExPSColorModes PNG. I'll hit Save, and it's going to replace the color image that I had there. And that is the end of this tutorial.